Okay, in this chapter we're gonna talk about how a render engine represents the light. And there is a common rule that you need to understand. This rule is, if it is hard to calculate, then we are gonna fake it, or we are going to give you the option of disable it. That's why, for example, we got many lights in a render engine which represent different types of lightings, but in real world light only behaves in one way, but we got many types of light in order to simplify or represent different types of lighting. Okay, for example, we got a directional light, which is the same as sunlight, because in order to represent realistically a sun, you need to make a big, enormous light and make it too far in order to the rays to do not lose energy and also cast directional shadows, and that's hard to do. So we got this directional light in order to make our lives much easier. Okay, then we got a dome light. A dome light is to emulate the effect of the sunlight hitting the atmosphere, because or maybe the effect of the light inside a room, because with this type of lights we don't need to model every bit of a room in order to have some cool lighting of an interior, or maybe we do not need to make a big sphere that emits light that emulates the atmosphere. So that's why we got these types of light. Okay, we got these types of light to make our life easy, but there is no special behavior of light. It's just the normal behavior of light. Okay, the other two types of light are point and spotlight. Okay, point light is the basic light. It's just a bulb light, a light that emits in all directions, and a spotlight is just to emulate a spotlight, which is a light that has some kind of mirror or some kind of case that directs the light beams in just one direction. Okay, but in order to do this inside our render engine, if we didn't have spotlights, we need to put a point light inside a box or inside a cylinder and then render it, and this is going to be very hard because we need indirect lighting bounces, and it's pretty long and hard to calculate. So these spotlights makes our lives much more easy, which is, as I said, is the intention of all that types of light. Okay, now let me talk about global illumination, which is an effect that is pretty hard to calculate. So that's why we got this effect separated. Global illumination is the effect of the bounce of light in all the materials that surrounds our scene. What is happening is the light bounces in maybe a red material, it gets this red color, and it tints of red all the shadows, which is very hard to calculate because we need to launch many secondary rays that cost many time and resources for the computer. So what we do is just give you the option to use it or not use it, global illumination. Okay, of course in reality it happens always, but this is just an option when you can deactivate or at least decide the quantity or quality of the secondary rays, this global illumination quality, which can be a good option to have. Okay, so what happens with ambient occlusion? It's about the same thing. It's a natural thing that happens always with light, but we got a problem here. It's hard to calculate. So we got two options. One of the options, it substitutes the other. So this is very important, because if you are using a ray tracing engine like Arnold or V-Ray, you need to know that ambient occlusion comes naturally with the ray tracing. Okay, so you do not need to fake it. But if you are using something like Unreal or a real-time render engine, normally you fake it and you put it on a texture. What you do not need to do is put it on the texture when you are using offline render engine like V-Ray or Arnold. Okay, so it's either one or the other. If you use real-time ray tracing, which is a new technology, you do not need anymore to fake the ambient occlusion normally. Okay, so these are the options, and just know that one or the another is the best choice. Use both of them. Is a little bit complex and gives you weird results, but can be okay. But well, that's the thing with ambient occlusion. Okay, so it's pretty hard to calculate in some ways, so we fake it, and we fake it always with normal maps, because it does not exist. So you need to add an ambient occlusion, a fake ambient occlusion in the texture, but you don't need to add a fake ambient occlusion if all that you are using is geometry. Okay, that's all. Okay, so next thing I'm gonna talk about is the emissive. The emissive intention is to emulate or fake the effect of a light in the camera. So the effect when we see a light through a camera, because emulate this effect, put in a semi-transparent glass and behind it put in a light, it's a total waste of resources, because we can do just put geometry that emulates the glass of this emissive thing. Let's put a light bulb or maybe a luminary in the room, and just in this glass put an emissive texture, and put the emissive parameter, use the emissive parameter, and it will fake the same effect. And you can do a bloom or something like that to emulate the bloom, and that's why we got emissive. It's a texture that overrides the albedo, the reflection, and all of that, and it's pretty easy to calculate. Okay, so now let me talk just a little bit about real-time tricks, because what happens when we have a real-time render engine? We have some tricks to fake the global illumination and all that stuff, because we are not ray tracing everything at every frame, because it's too hard to calculate for a render engine, and it's impossible, because an offline render, because like let's say V-Ray or Arnold, what it does is just ray traces everything, almost everything, and it does pretty precise calculations. But when we use real-time render engines, what we do is sacrifice quality in order to have a real-time render, and in order to the player or the visualizer to move inside the scene. So what we do is mainly two things. We pre-bake normally the light, okay, and we apply it upon the textures in a secondary a secondary UV map that goes in an overlay or an additive mode upon the textures. So this has many disadvantages, but is the technique that normally is used. And another technique that is used too is fake global illumination that can be real time by a thing that we call voxels. A voxel is just a 3D point in a space that stores some lighting information, and the objects that are near this point reads the global illumination information from this singular point, which is actually very fake, very unrealistic, but it more or less works in some cases. Okay, this is a very small resume of what happens with real-time render engines, but you got these options in real-time render engines, and just you got all of that, and you got to do a little bit of extra work in order to have the lighting baked and all that stuff. Okay.